and you are locked into a very special episode of the Leo podcast. My name is Josh, and I'm glad to at least be back with you for this episode. Unfortunately, my wife is not able to attend for this event. She is busy with schoolwork, getting her one step closer to becoming an LPC. So we'll let that one slide for this week. Last week we had a great roundtable with a lot of amazing people just sharing like their favorite animated game or movie or show, and then kind of communicating what that means to them and what theme and type of elements came from that. And just like last week, we will do it again this week with our panel. We have actually two returning guests and one new guest with us. We have Casey Covel, who is what I like to call Jane of all trades, as well as a cosplayer and known as Cutscene Addict on Instagram. We have Sophie from Sophiecast Cosplay, is all around great gal and an amazing cosplayer as well. And we have from Beneath the Tangles community, Nate. Thank you all so much for being here. Really excited to kind of dive in and see what you guys have planned to share with our audience. So what we'll do is we'll go one by one in just a random order. And you'll first kind of introduce yourself, kind of what your profession is or what your expertise is, and then go into your show or movie that you've chosen, as well as your topic. But before we get too far into that, if you haven't already, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you're not already, and ring the bell for notifications so that you are notified every time we upload a new video. So first we got Nate up, and he is going to be talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion. So Nate, you have the floor.
All right. Well, I have to acknowledge first that this particular topic is a little bit on the weird side because it kind of requires a little bit of mental gymnastics, I admit, to come to some of the conclusions I come to when I watch it. Because I think a lot of people know Evangelion for its some of the surface and some of the deeper themes. Mostly people kind of terminate on we're fighting angels for some reason, which, yeah, I gotta admit, a little weird for a Christian point of view. But when I was watching, I think it was when I was watching the rebuilds, I kind of understood that there might be, in a lot of things that aren't like explicitly labeled Christian. I think there's some things that we can dive in and extrapolate, kind of like take the good, leave the bad kind of things. So with regard to Evangelion, there's a lot of digging you have to do because of how primarily psychological the show is and the movies and everything. But there is a theme that I ran into that I didn't quite understand the first time I watched it. And I realized there is something wrong with everybody in the show. Like there is something actually directly wrong with everybody in the show. Shinji is probably the easiest pick. He isolates himself. He has trouble connecting with people. He whines. Everybody wants him to get in the robot. That sort of thing. But if you look at everybody around him, they're all afflicted with some sort of psychological malady. For example, Misato, the I guess vice commander of Nerve, if I remember it correctly, Shinji's caretaker during this whole thing. She's got this thing where she seems really confident, and then she runs into an issue that she can't really address, and her first instinct is to try to get what she wants in a more physical somewhat sexual sort of way. So she'll kind of try to use her body to get what she wants. You have Asuka, who's really outgoing, someone who would say is like who should have been the real protagonist of the show. But she is afflicted with an extremely strong case of, and before I continue, I should probably note I'm not a psychologist. I don't have any expertise with regard to like psychology or anything like that. I am a Twitch streamer, part-time voice actor, cosplayer, karaoke enthusiast. That's my background. So
Yeah,
That works for me.
and
so
I was just about to send you some referrals. Oh well.
Oh, I wouldn't. I mean, I know some people, but I wouldn't. That wouldn't trust me. So, anyway, all the observations I'm throwing out are just things that I noticed as I was watching the show, and aren't necessarily like these are diagnoses coming from a healthcare professional. No, these just things I noticed. And I say that when I talk about Asuka. I'm reminded of that when I talk about Asuka because of how deep of a, how can I put this? She has an extremely deep need for approval that she hides with the, with the veneer of confidence that she puts out. So she is constantly putting people down. She's got this air of, I'm better than everyone. I can do everything by myself. But you get her in her alone times, and she is desperate for approval. She absolutely needs approval, such that she overperforms. Like she's very good at what she does, and she is determined to be the best at what she does, because she needs people to acknowledge her. And I don't want to say because, again, not a professional. I would assume that has something to do with the reveal that her mother died she was very young. And I guess she didn't have really much of anybody to take care of her in the way that you would treat a child. But because she was selected for the Evangelion project, and because praise was heaped upon her when she did well, my understanding is that she developed this through line of, well, I can get what I want if I can't, and which is approval. I can get the approval and the love that I crave if I perform well. So I'm going to overachieve. And I apparently have a lot to say about Asuka today. But this sort of thing, I don't think I don't think this this quirk of humanity that everybody has is unique to those characters. I think everybody has it. But when I say quirk of humanity, I mean in the sense that everybody is kind of not kind of, everybody has an element where they're broken fundamentally in the show. And I think that kind of reflects people as a whole. Like there's something wrong with everyone. As I understand it, that's directly, that's a direct consequence of the fall of man. It goes all the way back to Eden. So I go there. I give all that setup to talk about what I really want to talk about, which was, I think the theme that I submitted was the idea of sin and reconciliation displayed in the show. I particularly noticed a theme running between Shinji Ikari and Gendo Ikari, father and son, who you learn very early on, Gendo, Shinji's father, effectively left him to fend for himself for several years, and then, out of the blue, called him into action because he needed him. Specifically to pilot the robot, which is why everyone's like, get in the robot, Shinji. Which is really the only way that the plot progresses. But there's this coldness between the two of them. Shinji kind of hates him, but also kind of needs him. Because, let's be real, kids need their parents. But effectively what Gendo does to him in the show and in the movies is effectively just abandon him. Now, the reason why that's important in Christian terms is because, I forgot to look up the verse. There is a verse, and I want to get the reference correctly, so I need to look this up real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I swear I had this in my notes earlier. I believe it's Ephesians 6:4. And just for context, I'll read 1 through 4 because it is important. So Ephesians 6:1 going forward, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Now, verse 4, very important. For some reason I've noticed that people skip this one or stop a little short. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, what does Gendo do to this kid? After his wife dies, Evangelion project gets off the ground. Gendo abandoned Shinji for years. I think we can count that as a provocation. So already their relationship is fraught. They do not understand each other. They don't get along because they don't understand each other. And I would argue that the one who is at fault for that is actually Gendo, because he abandoned his son. And initially my thought was, well, he's just the worst dad in all of anime. And a lot of people I think would have agreed with me for a while until Full Metal Alchemist. And I think we all know.
Yeah, we've gotten some.
I was about to debate you, man.
We got some other contenders since Evangelion.
Yeah.
Oh yes. So I held that thought right up until the end of the fourth Rebuild movie, the title of which is a complete mouthful, and I don't want to. Let me try it. Hang on. It's Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 thrice upon a time.
Wow.
That's the whole
that is.
right
Title stuff there, man.
It's a wonderful mouthful. Excuse me. But you actually have to get through all the rebuilds and to nearly, I want to say like maybe the last 45 to 30 minutes of the last movie to understand why Gendo does anything he does. And it's what I've come to understand because of that is that Gendo did what he did because his wife died, but it's not because his wife died. It's because he can't. Sorry, let me rephrase this. It's because before he met the woman who eventually became his wife, he didn't understand how to engage with people at all. So he'd spend most of his time alone, didn't really understand what life was worth living for. And then he met this woman, they fell in love, they married each other, they had Shinji, and then she dies as a part of Project Evangelion. I forget the name of what it was before. And so suddenly he has to go back to being alone, and he can't do it. Like, he absolutely can't do it. His love for his wife has affected him in such a way that he can't go back and be the person he used to be. And then he also has Shinji to take care of. And what he eventually comes to understand is that this whole experience that he's had with the Evangelion project, why he's doing everything he does is so he can spark off the human instrumentality project, which is something I still can't explain. So he can find his wife and be with her again. And at the end of everything, he realizes that a piece of his wife was with him the entire time, and it was in Shinji. And so in the very last thing we see of him is him kind of in a flashback, kind of going back to the scene where he left Shinji to be by himself, and him actually turning around and embracing his son. And actually, for the first time I'd ever seen him do this in any media I've ever seen, I think that's correct. He apologizes directly to Shinji for what he did to him. And that's what I found to be a kind of a roundabout way of getting to the idea of sin, its damages on people, not just for you or the person you sinned against, but for just about everybody around you. And a type of reconciliation that can take place when you decide to do the work to reconcile with the people you've wronged against.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There are not many points in an anime series that I can recall kind of the true reconciliation. One thing that really comes to mind, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, was Prince Zuko when he apologizes to Uncle Iroh, and just that wonderful prodigal son moment. And you're right, Nate. A lot of people, when we sin, we think, well, it's not really hurting anybody. I mean, they hurt the people, but no, I mean, it's spherical in a sense, because it's one action that could create, and often does, a domino effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. I would actually say that there's actually another anime that I was thinking of when I was thinking of this topic. That ended, I think it ended a little bit better, and that's Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
You have the same sort of.
I still have to finish that. I could after the dog daughter scene.
Oh, no.
Don't spoil it. It's too good.
That's one word for it, I guess.
I completely understand. I completely understand where you're coming from on that. Like, that was hard to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, by the way, is not the guy who gets.
But I like what you said.
No, he gets exactly what he deserves.
But to your point, Nate, I like what you said about how that was a realization that came to me in the past year, just in my devotional time with God, is that sometimes when we suffer, sometimes it's something we've done. You know, we've kind of brought it on ourselves. Sometimes it's something someone else has done. And it's this ripple of sin that might be someone in another country, in another state, in another city, several generations ago, who has done something that their sin is affecting you as a person today. But I think the beautiful thing about that, and what you hit on in your kind of Devo, is reconciliation can do the same thing. We don't know the blessings we have today. That may be the result of someone reconciling, or someone being merciful or being gracious. And I think that's beautiful. And I find that very encouraging, because sometimes we don't see the immediate effect of sowing that goodness, that godliness in our own lifetime. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, is God says, I can see the tapestry. I can see the big picture, and I've got you playing this critical part in it. And you may not see it until you get to heaven, but you're going to see it. And I think that's really, really cool. I like how you articulated that with Evangelion.
There's actually a verse in 1 Corinthians that captures just what you're saying. Where is the translation? Darn it. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. Like, we don't get it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I love that.
We don't get it. We're not gonna. And we're not, like, this side of heaven, we're not gonna understand. But then we will. That's the promise.
Part of faith is just knowing that promise is going to be fulfilled, and we don't see that in our human lives, and so it's hard to think, okay, well, why do my actions matter? Like we were talking about earlier, it's but later, we just have to trust. It's part of the story.
And I think the coolest part is there's nothing God cannot use. There's nothing that's so broken. You're talking about Evangelion. Talk about a cast full of messed up people. I think that's one of the reasons it's such a timeless anime as we watch it. And some of the characters we're a little repulsed by, but I think part of it's because we see little bits of ourselves in all of them. It's like, I know what that's like to want love, to want approval, to feel the need to overexert myself or feel lost or those different struggles that the characters have in that show. It is very deeply psychological, but you see how it all weaves together into this beautiful narrative that leaves you thinking. And that's, God does that with our lives. He tells stories and he's like, there's nothing so broken I can't use it. I can't redeem it. And better yet, I'm using you to tell my grand narrative. And someday you'll get to see that. And maybe you'll get to see it in your lifetime too. And it's just really cool. It makes me excited. That's the kind of stuff that gets me excited. So.
And Casey, to your point of that, when we're telling stories and when we're talking about the medium of animation, anime, you're right. There is nothing that we can't talk about or we can't use, for the most part, to communicate a redemptive analogy, a part of the gospel. Like I remember, we actually got some emails when we did our Has-Been Hotel episode. It's like, well, why are you talking about this? There's something you can do. It's like, honestly, that show is all about redemption in some form or shape. And, to a secular audience who may not, think about that at first, go back and say, oh yeah, there's this and there's this, symbolism. And so we kind of like to challenge ourselves sometimes with that.
No, I mean, if you look at the Bible, and I'm not saying, go jump into sin. It's okay. I think there's certain things we're called to approach very, very wisely, very carefully. But if you look at the Bible and you look at different illustrations in the Bible, God loves to use these things that people go, why are you using that? Why a manger? Why not a palace? Why feed Elijah with a raven? A raven's considered a filthy bird. Why not send an angel down there? So you see these illustrations in the Bible where there's nothing God cannot use. We're called to be discerning, of course, in how we approach those things. But, I think that's kind of neat that we can find parts of him, parts of truth in fiction, in all kinds of fiction.
Even Evangelion, it's not, there's a lot of Christian imagery in Evangelion, but it's my understanding is that was not the intent. They just kind of thought that was cool when they were making the show. It wasn't to make a bigger message or anything, but here we are, you can still take those allegories, those stories, those messages from this anime. I think there's a lot in that that we can draw from and we can talk about in light of God. So I think that's amazing.
And you can't separate the meaning in the symbols from those symbols. To your point, the creator is quoted, and Nate, you may have the quote somewhere where he says, oh, we just thought it looked cool. We just wanted it to be mysterious. There's crosses, there's angels. But the thing is, you can't take the meaning out of those symbols. Even though the creator has no intent for them, everyone watching that show is going, that's a cross. That's an angel. Culturally, I understand the significance to an extent of those images. So there must be some meaning here. And that's what we do. We find that meaning.
I was actually going to say that on the other end of it, you'll have some people who are who come from our side of faith, witness something like Evangelion and say there's nothing that you can use there that's actually blasphemous. Because just looking at the imagery. And I would respectfully say, not really. I get it, but not really. Because of just how, and I would say that probably a lot of Japanese artists at the time. I'm not exactly sure about how things are now. I think it's improved. But I would say that Japanese artists at the time would take something that has, I don't want to say deep cultural significance, but sometimes, yes, deep cultural, deep cultural significance to a different culture, and use it just because it looks really cool. And the meaning behind doing that is, in a lot of ways, not in any way, shape, or form meant to be blasphemous or disrespectful. They're just like, I don't understand what this is, but it looks really cool. It really speaks to me, and I kind of want to use it in my art. Yeah. So, and I think that's the case of what was going on with the use of crosses and a lot of Christian imagery in Evangelion, because of how, at least visually speaking, Christian iconography, just spoke to the artist who created the show.
Absolutely. And Japan is a very multi-religious culture. So when you look at, and I'm not an expert in this topic, this is just generally from what I've researched, they have a very general view of spirituality, so they may use symbols but not assign religious meaning to them. It's more of a general spirituality. And, the famous saying is, you pray at the Shinto shrine, you are Buddhist, and you get married in a Christian church in Japan. They have this very kind of homogenous, multi-religious culture. So Evangelion, my guess is, it's been a while since I've seen it, you can probably find a lot of other religions in that show. There's probably references to Buddhism, to Shintoism, to other things. I just can't think of anything off the top of my head, but even the mechs, or what are they called? I'm sorry. In Evangelion, the mechs, they have a term.
Evas?
Yes. I believe that's kind of a kaiju inference of sorts, and the kaiju are a form of yokai, and the yokai are part of Shintoism. I mean, you can get really rich with this stuff. So it is pretty
fascinating. Cool. I've not heard that personally, but it does make a fair bit of sense.
Yeah, don't quote me on it. That's, again, just me, general things I've picked up here and there. I am not a historian, but I love it. I love what you said about the show. I feel like you could write a book on Evangelion. It's so rich.
Well, you definitely give us a lot to think on, and yeah, I guess there are so many directions you go with just that one topic. So we're now on to our second person, and Casey, you just have a lot to say, so let's go to you, and you'll be and you'll be talking about the anime Blame.
And actually, it's a great segue from what Nate was saying, because we kind of ended by talking about faith, and that's my topic for Blame. So a little bit of background. Blame is a manga series. It was developed by a mangaka who was an architectural student, and his manga has this very rich architectural design to it. In fact, most of it does not include dialogue. It's a lot of wordless panels. It's a lot of action adventure. And very confusing. Like, if you want to, I read the manga in about a day's time, because I was doing some research for something. I was not okay for like 2 days after that experience. It was like my brain felt like it had been displaced and put somewhere for a bit. I'm like, what is reality? What is this? Because it's a sci-fi. It's kind of a dystopian sci-fi. It takes place in this world where humans started using machines to build a city. And then, as all good dystopian stories go, the machines got out of control of humanity and kept auto-building without being able to stop. So what happened is Earth got this city that was essentially built like the size of a solar system way out into the galaxy. So it's this massive city run by cold but sentient technology. And what is left of humanity is now seen as a threat by the machines. So humanity has kind of broken off into these little isolated colonies deep inside this giant city, trying to survive. They have to leave the colonies now and then to get food, to get supplies. It's very risky. And it used to be that humans could, of course, control the city and control the machines because they had this special gene in their eyes that the machine could read. And that person could control the city, essentially. Well, that gene died out and the machines ran amok, essentially, is the plot of Blame. So Netflix eventually got a film adaptation of this manga. They picked a little arc from the manga to adapt, and for a long time, no anime of this story was attempted because it was thought to be visually impossible. Just because when you look at a panel from this manga, it's so detailed, the architecture and just the scale of the story. So they picked a little part of the plot, and it follows this group of human colonists who are basically trying to survive. They're on their last legs. They're like, the city's going to get us. We're running out of food. And the main character is a young girl named Zuru, who is kind of daring to continue to believe that there's a chance for them. So I want to talk about faith a little bit, because I feel like that's the main story, the main theme in Blame. So question for you all. What convinces you that someone or something is worth putting your faith in? What are some of the deciding factors that convince you that someone or something is worth putting your faith in? Now, you don't have to go huge with this. You could certainly talk about God, but you could talk about a person. You could talk about a product. You could talk about the chair you're sitting on.
I mean, for me, reliability is a big one. I mean, both products and people. I feel that the people that I interact with and the products that I use should be, reliable to an extent. Not 100% of the time, but, 90, 95%. So reliability would be one thing that would cause me to put my faith in someone or something.
I think that's a good one. And reliability, what I'm hearing you say kind of between the lines is it's going to keep doing the thing that I expect it to do. It's going to be good on its word is kind of what I'm hearing you say.
That's a really good question. I'm really thinking deeply on this one.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like small scale.
You can go as deep as you
small
want.
scale, like, when I'm trying out a new restaurant or something, am I going to put faith into like, is it going to be good? Oh, I hear, from friends who have said like, yeah, that kind of goes along with reliability, and feedback from others maybe.
Okay. So someone you trust says, hey, I believe in this, or I have faith that it's this way.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So you can think like bigger scale too. It's like, that's kind of what we do as Christians. We share the message and to people. Yeah. And honestly, a lot of it is tied for me with hope too. Just like, I put my faith in something when I want to have hope that it's going to be, maybe that's the only thing I can have hope in, or I feel like it's worth it to put hope into something. I'm not sure if I can articulate that very well, but
no, I totally. You're speaking Hebrews 11:1.
It's
right
true.
there. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You're right on the money.
Well, a lot of what I was thinking has already been covered, but I think in terms of like what causes me to put my faith in something, is really the testing of that thing, which really comes back around to reliability. Has it been proven to be reliable? And also has the testing of this thing shown to be reliable in and of itself? So say like you were going to test you were going to test to see if this chair that I'm sitting on is going to hold my weight up. I believe in that. In this particular case, I would believe that it does because it has done so before. And the testing of this chair would be reliable because I have sat in this chair before.
Yep.
And it has proven to be reliable before. So
I love that. And you guys are, to me, you're hitting on all the definitions of faith that I would describe if I were trying to talk about it. And everything you've said is critical to the narrative of Blame, of the movie in particular, because the opening scene, you have Zuru, this young girl. She's probably 16, 17. She's running out of her colony with other young people who she's kind of said, hey, let's go believe that there's food out there. Let's go try to find some food for the colony. You have a sick sister. The colony is running low on supplies. Let's go get some food. So she's not supposed to do this because everyone in the village, the elders, are saying it's not worth it. There's nothing out there. There's no hope, basically. And she says, let's go. So they put on these hellmetals, which is this headgear that protects them from the city, basically, because there's watchtowers. And if they detect a human face, they'll activate basically the firewall to come hunt them down and take them out. So they put on their helmets, they go out with their gear, and they try to find food. They make it to the food spot. The food's gone. They're like, all right, well, that didn't work. And then they get caught by the city. And it's this mad dash, and they're running back, trying to get back to the colony. And Zuru is in the lead, and her companions are just dropping like flies. And this stranger comes out of nowhere. No explanation. He shoots down the robots that are attacking them with this gun that can shoot like 7 miles wide. They've never seen technology like this. And he saves them, basically. And Zuru and a couple of the other kids are left. And he looks at her and he says, take off your helmet. I want to see your eyes. And there's a watchtower right there. And the stranger's not wearing a helmet. And he's not being attacked. Nothing is happening. And Zuru's like, if I take off my helmet, this watchtower is going to see me and it's going to kill me. And her companions are like, don't do it. Like, we literally just escaped this thing. All of our friends have died. But Zuru has been saved by this stranger. She's seen how powerful he is. And she sees he's not wearing a helmet. He's fully exposed. He's fully at risk. And this thing is not attacking him. So she dares to trust him. She takes that step of faith. She takes the helmet off. And she is not attacked. He's able to protect her. And it's this really cool moment of faith. And it kind of ties into what all you are saying. It's reliability. It's proving yourself. It's knowing that what the person is saying is true. And when we look at this scene from a Christian perspective, the stranger's name is Killy. He's kind of your Terminator-esque cool guy who, comes out of the shadows, saves the day, and walks off into the sunset. But he takes the risk before he asks Zuru to take the risk. He's saying, I've already gone before you. I've already done this thing, and I'm going to walk you through it too. And that's kind of what God does with us, right? He's already gone through death. He's already gone through suffering. And he says, you're going to go through this too, but I've gone through it already, and I'm going to pull you out the other side. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to see you through this. So what they don't realize in this scene is that Killy has this special device around his neck that's a cloaking device, and it protects him from the towers. And so he's able to protect them as well. So as the story goes on, they bring Killy back to the village. He's, of course, as the messianic archetype, he's immediately treated with mistrust. They're like, ooh, he's too different. He's too powerful. We're not sure. Maybe he's going to betray us. There's some really cool moments that happen in there. And the children, of course, are the ones that trust him first. And in the Bible, we see the same thing. It's the kids. It's the faith of a child, that is praised by Jesus in the Bible. But where the story ultimately ends is time and time again, Zuru has to decide to trust Killy. They're put into deeper and deeper situations that are dangerous. And ultimately, the human colony is infiltrated by the machines. Killy saves them and gets them out, and they have to evacuate to a further away colony. And it ends where Zuru's like, well, I want you, Killy, to come with us. You've walked with us. You've kept us safe through all this. I want you to stay with us. And he kind of says, I have to keep looking for this gene that's going to restore control of the city to humanity. None of you have it. I got to keep doing my mission. And he gives her that watchtower cloaking device as a parting gift. And it's like, remember when you put your faith in me, I'm giving you this so you remember that. And you remember that I'm still acting on that faith for you. And she never sees him again. And the movie ends very profoundly, I think, where the gene is never found as far as the movie is concerned. It literally ends where Killy's walking off into the city, and Zuru's granddaughter, because it's been a couple generations since then, is narrating the ending, and she says, that was the last the villagers ever saw of him. My grandmother, Zuru, always talked to me about Killy when I was young. A long time has passed, but I believe. I know that somewhere he's still out there in that endless city continuing his search. And that's how the movie ends. And for a minute, when I saw the ending, I was like, where's the gene? Like, this is what I was promised. He's going to find the gene. He's going to save people. The city's going to be returned to humans. But that's not the point of the story. The point is, when you're confronted with adversity, and certainly as Christians, we relate to this, and we're confronted with the difficulty of the world, do we continue to hope? Do we continue to hope when there is no evidence of things getting better? And that verse in Hebrews 11, faith is the substance of things hoped for. It always begins with hope. We hope things get better. We hope that things improve. The evidence of things not seen. When we think about evidence, what evidence, so, as Christians, what would you say is evidence of our faith? I'm just general things. What would you say is some evidence of our faith? Or that what we believe is real, what we put our faith in is real?
Actually, I've been thinking about this for a while. And at least for me, because I've personally gone through kind of like a dark night of the soul in a way where I kind of started questioning everything. I think the thing that I really came back to with regard to faith and with regard to how I believe that the Bible is true is because it says true things, specifically as it pertains to how human behavior works, and like how, like, the way that the Bible has described us as human beings on a fundamental level is true and remains to be true even thousands of years after it's been written. So because it says that true thing, and that true thing has persisted throughout human history, that's one marker where I can believe that the Bible is true. And if it's true there, it can be true in other ways.
Yeah. So that kind of that's that evidence of things not seen. There's a proof there. And it's that reliability. Like you're saying, it's consistent. We're seeing it then, we're seeing it now. There's a consistency to it.
For me, I think it always comes down to, like, if I ever start to doubt or think about things, and I think that's a totally normal thing, is to, question and have doubt. I think that we all relate to that. But I always think of, I just kind of look around me and I look at how vast, or I think about how vast the universe is and how, we're here. And that's a miracle in itself. So I think a little bit about, the miracle of life all around us. And I think there's no way that this is just, how could this just be a coincidence, And I think of just the beauty of everything around us, and it's just mind-boggling to me. And I'm like, as a human, I can't comprehend, all the stars that exist in the galaxy, and thinking about the universe of blame, and I think about that city a lot ever since seeing that movie. I'm like, as vast as a solar system, you can't comprehend that. As humans, we can't comprehend how big a solar system is, really. So that's kind of what I always come back to. I don't know if that's, I guess it's evidence in a way, but it's also, things I can't see or comprehend.
Right. But there's that burden of evidence where you're like, it's bigger than my brain is capable of processing. So there's a being out there that can process it. It's not me.
For me, it's kind of a combination of what both Sophie and Nate had said, because I also think about the verse, I forget which book it is in, but is where Jesus tells Thomas, it's like, blessed are you because you have seen, but the blessed more are those who have not seen yet believe. And the whole cosmos and what people have believed has been the Big Bang Theory, and everything like happened, we're here just by happenstance. I just don't. Things are so interwoven and intricately placed that there has to be what's some referred to as an intelligent design to it all. And I was watching a YouTube video by Mike Weiner. Not sure if you guys are familiar with him, but he is a YouTuber who encourages and helps people to think biblically. And just about the whole like comprehension thing, Sophie, you were saying, Mike Weiner was doing something on heaven, and he said, "You will have lived forever without having lived forever." And what he meant by that was God is ever, enriching those who are with him throughout eternity. There's always going to be something new. Like there's no goal to get towards. There's always like that's where it's like infinite wonders and knowledge comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I believe there's a verse
that's
that
awesome.
says, and I lost it. I'd have to look
You're
it
good.
up. But it references like pleasures forevermore.
Yes.
I remember it was
Sounds
it was written in way better than I just said it. So I gotta find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, see if you can find it. And while you're looking that up, I think what I'd add to that, and I think it's something that all of you would probably agree with, I think it's what most Christians would probably agree with, is another evidence we experience is our own transformations. We're not the same people that we were before we meet Christ. And sometimes that change is subtle, sometimes it's huge, and sometimes it's always this long journey, of when we look back, we're like, wow, I really have become a very different person. We are also the evidence of things not seen, which is kind of profound when you think about it. And the way this ties into the ending of Blame is at the end, all they have left is stories of people who met him. But the current generation has not met Killy. They just have people's word, much like the disciples and those who walked with Christ. They wrote their experiences down. We now have those stories. And Killy leaves them that physical barrier, cloaking device behind as a memento of I was a real person. I exist. I still exist. I'm still out there. And it's this technology that's far beyond anything they have access to. So much like, we look at creation and we go, my mind can't fathom it. There's a higher intelligence. There's a higher something out there. That's kind of what that cloaking device does for them, is they go, well, we didn't make this. This had to have come from some being more powerful than us. And it ends on that note of hope. We're going to continue to hope and continue to trust because of all of the evidence of the things not seen. And I think that's the beauty of Blame. So if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's like an hour and a half. It's not a real long movie. But it's a nice little thought experiment on this concept of faith and on this concept of hope. And let me see if I have... Oh, I'll end it there because I'm going kind of long. So that'll be me.
Before we continue, I did find that verse, by the way. It's Psalm 16:11, and it reads, "You have made known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore."
It's great.
I love that. It reminds me of another verse, the eye has not seen nor ear heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man. We haven't even thought of it, the things that God has in store. It's like, that's kind of like you were saying about the solar system size city. It's like, I can't even picture that. It's like, think about all the creative minds, the creative anime creators, the things they've come up with. And it says the things God has in mind are things we haven't even briefly thought about, which is mind blowing to me. It's like, my word.
Like even a lot of people have tapped into like AI. It's like, show me a picture of what heaven or the New Jerusalem or it would turn like it paints a pretty great description, but again, it's only painted out through what is drawn from different services and generative factors. But as amazing as that looks, I mean, even if you times it by 1,000, you still cannot comprehend.
Yeah. Everything that we can come up with technology and just the sheer force of human imagination, God will always say it's more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I think it's way more than
Yeah.
that.
I love that.
Amazing.
Yeah. One other thing I want to add on to your topic of faith, Casey, is I've come through like a lot of YouTube videos about deconstructionists, and I've always heard that, you know, it's all right to have questions. It's all right to deconstruct. The important thing is that you reconstruct. What questions do you have? What does the scripture say about those things, and how can you build back up of what your belief was? And I've seen a lot of people who are deconstructionists, and it's always very interesting to what their fallback of the belief is, because 9 times out of 10, what a deconstructionist has said, so, oh, you know, when I, you know, got rid of the Bible, or I, you know, abandoned that doctrine because it's all fairy tales, I just like fell in love with nature, and I believe so much in nature, which is very new agey, to say the least. But my question is, okay, well, when hard times hit and when you're so distraught, is nature really what you can confide in to help carry you through? I mean, for me personally, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that either.
Yeah, I think that
I think
yeah, not the nature of it, especially this
Sure
time
not.
of year. It's like I'm gonna go outside. The mosquitoes are gonna carry
It's
me
not a
off.
comforting
So,
kind of nature.
no, not
with
doing
how
it.
often California catches
know,
on fire, I can't do it either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. God can bring us around using anything, and I believe that when people go through deconstruction, he's there with them, and he's going to help them find their way back to him, and he can use anything to do that. And I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, nature can leave us in awe, which I think can leave us open to thoughts of, well, where did this come from? You know, how is it that I feel this wonderful feeling in my soul? Where does that originate? What does that mean? But we can never have a relationship with it. You know, it can never hear us. It can never, and it points to God.
Right,
It's a
and
mirror.
that's kind of what I was
You know,
getting
I
to.
would
Like,
say.
not that nature is a bad thing at all; it's part of God's beautiful creation. But
Oh yeah, of
do
course.
not put your faith or your fate in it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really the test of faith: is can the object of your faith sustain the faith you're putting in it? Can it make good on it? And sometimes we put faith in ourselves. That gets really messy.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You know, and I think that can get really messy.
Can't say the number of times I've tried to do
God's
that.
like, don't do that.
It never ends up very well for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that in both of those scenarios, those things that you would attempt to put your faith in will eat you.
Mm.
If you let it eat you, it will absolutely consume you.
I agree. A lot of times we put our faith in what heals us or what makes us feel better, and you give a lot of power to the things that heal you. So you have to be very careful. You know, what is this thing? How much am I really giving this? Can it really do what I think it can do? You know, kind of thing. I hope that made sense. We're indebted to what heals us. We're indebted to what restores us. So is it worthy of our faith and our trust, I guess is what I'm saying.
All right, Sophie. Well, last but certainly not least, let's go ahead with you and Apothecary Diaries.
Yes, I'm very excited to talk about this series. I was kind of obsessed with it earlier in the year. Has anybody here watched or read the Apothecary Diaries?
I want to so bad.
No
I
worries.
have not yet.
We still need to resume it.
Yeah, no worries. I just want to know.
I haven't started.
Okay, no worries. Well, hopefully I will encourage you guys to check it out or recheck it out. But okay, I won't go into any like spoiler territory because I feel like this anime, there's so many layers to it. When I first came across it, I was working in a library and a young patron, like teenage patron, came in and asked specifically that we buy this manga. And I had never heard of it before. So I looked it up and it just kind of looked like a cutesy, like kind of historical manga series, like romance, which I'm here for anyway. But upon like further investigation, I started to learn that there was a lot more depth to this series. And a lot of different kind of darker themes when you get really into it. So I won't go really far into the themes of this series because I feel like a lot of it is spoiler territory, but you'll have to explore it on your own. But just a kind of surface summary of this series. The Apothecary Diaries is about a young apothecary. Her name is Mao Mao. She's living in a fictional dynasty. It's really similar to Imperial China, I would say. Mao Mao is very skilled with medicines. She was raised by her adoptive father, who was a very prolific apothecary himself in the red light district of this society where they live. So she was raised around a lot of like that kind of behavior. She had kind of a dark upbringing. That becomes really clear when one day she is unexpectedly kidnapped by bandits and she is sold to the imperial palace where she must work as a servant from there on out. And what's really interesting about Mao Mao immediately is this is a really dark and really scary moment. And in any other anime, you know, you'd be like, this is this is awful, this is terrifying. But Mao Mao's reaction is just kind of like, well, this was going to happen someday. Like, well, she's just, yeah. So her character is very, very interesting. So that really intrigued me. But, you know, some time passes and she's working as a servant in this palace. And she starts hearing of this inexplicable illness that's afflicting some of the concubines and women and newborn babies in the palace. And nobody can figure out where this illness is coming from, how to cure it. And of course, with her background as an apothecary, and she has a really prolific knowledge of poisons, she kind of uncovers the case behind the scenes of what's actually happening, and she's able to solve the case. And so she obviously catches the attention of people in the court, despite not even wanting to catch attention. But she especially catches attention of a eunuch who is named Genshi, who is really revered and honored in the court for his incredible beauty and grace. But something else really interesting about Mao Mao is she is not taken by his beauty or anything. She even finds him a little bit annoying. So their relationship is my favorite part of the series because you see their relationship develop over time. And something that I love about their relationship is that they end up growing in fondness for each other and mutual respect, not out of, class standing or anything like that. And obviously Genshi finds her very beautiful, but she doesn't understand or comprehend that. She doesn't even, so, they start to appreciate each other for who they are, and they kind of work together through these cases as they go. But like I said, this anime does end up involving a lot of incredible themes and nuance, but I wanted to hone in specifically on one of humility and maybe honor in this society. So given the setting, it's no surprise characters demonstrate honor and obedience to characters that have higher class standing in the court. That's a very big theme in this series where Mao Mao, she's an interesting character in that she's not even really resistant to her role as a servant. But, there are people in the palace who look down upon her or, they see themselves as a lot higher. But Mao Mao doesn't really strive to be noticed or to improve her standing in the court, even though Genshi tries to get her, to become more of a high standing person in the court. But the whole setting that this series takes place in, it makes me think about the values of our society today and also the values that we hold as Christians. Because I think the world we live in is often representative of the palace that Mao Mao lives in. Obviously, we live in a very different society. But in this palace, there are these really tall, like unscalable walls between the people who have wealth in a material sense and who have power in that sense, and those who do not. So, of course, we are intended to honor those who have great beauty, power, influence. In today's society, maybe that's celebrities or, people in political power, but God views honor, I believe, differently. So as I was studying in preparation for the Roundtable and in light of this series, I just came across Proverbs 18:10-12. And it just immediately called to mind the palace that is in the Apothecary Diaries. And this verse reads, "The name of the Lord is a fortified tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. Before a downfall, the heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor." So it made me think of the Apothecary Diaries, because it was like I just randomly came across it kind of and I was like, oh my gosh, that really made me think of this. And something that's interesting in the Apothecary Diaries is these people who are being afflicted with these like illnesses that Mao Mao is, she's solving these cases. It's interesting because the people being afflicted with these illnesses have these high standings in the court. You'd think that they'd be untouchable. They think they're untouchable. They think they're immortal. And Mao Mao is just this person who is below them in status, and she is going out of her way to still help these people who really you would think that she would hold a lot of resentment towards these people who have put her in this position. But though she does, she also has a really strong sense of justice. She knows that what's going on is wrong, so she's going to use her gifts to solve the cases that are going on. So I think that one question I had was, when do we stand up against the evil that's going on? When do we stand up against the powers that be? When, as followers of God, do we discern when it's time to stand up and speak out and call notice to ourselves in the way that, Mao Mao does sometimes? And when do we, step back and we honor those, that have more power than us in a way? It was just something that I was thinking about and wanted to get your thoughts on, maybe.
It's a great question and very, very relevant, I think, right now. And I'll just start by saying this to kind of get the conversation rolling. One of the first verses that came to my mind, and it might be the verse that's on everyone's mind right now, is the part of the Bible where I believe it's a situation where the Pharisees go to Jesus and they say, essentially, who should you obey? Let's say your scripture or God or whatever says to do this, but then your authority says to do this. And he shows him a coin and he says, whose image is on this? Or is it tribute? Is it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar? It's something like that. Should we pay taxes? It's some question like that. And he says, whose image is on the coin? And they say, well, Caesar's. He said, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and give unto God that which is God's. And later, of course, we see it is lawful for us to obey God rather than man. And I think one of the ways I've interpreted that verse is there are very clear rules about authority in Scripture. One is pray for those, who are in authority. If at all possible, live peaceably with all men. Don't go around starting fights and that kind of thing. And remember that we serve God's kingdom. We're not here to take over our human kingdom, and God, we belong to a different kingdom. So we are meant to be representatives of God. And one of the ways I've always approached it is I tend to take more of a personal approach in my own life. It's like, I think some people are called to make bigger statements and go out and do bigger things across the city or across the state. For me, it's very much a one-on-one approach. If someone says, hey, what do you think about this? Or let's talk about this. I like that one-on-one conversation more, because I feel like that's what I'm called to do personally. But what do you all think? I think this is a really excellent question, is where is that line? At what point do we, another great example is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the idol. At that point, they're being asked to do something that's clearly against God's commandment, and they say, we can't. Sorry. Like, we're willing to obey you in other things, but we can't obey you in this. This goes against, what God has asked us to do.
In the context of, where is that line? There are many examples that we can draw upon, like if you're a part of the company and your company has asked you to do something that is directly in violation of, your code of ethics or your faith in Christ. And is it time to speak out? Should you part ways from being associated with that company? Or is there some reconciliation that can happen for you to voice your concerns, to perhaps have an exemption or to change the course or the path that it's going down? In response to, not going out and starting fights or looking for fights just because, somebody has done something or I don't agree with that. I don't know where it is in the Bible, but dragging somebody out by their beard seemed to be pretty effective.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I think when something is in direct violation of like God's laws and what Christ had taught us, yes, there are times where we should turn the other cheek, so to say, but we shouldn't be meek. In when there's a situation like, say, for instance, somebody like spat on your Bible and like kicked sand in your face, and I mean, no, I'd probably have a response to that. I just want to turn the other cheek and say, okay, you want to do it again?
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those, I think there are circumstances where, we just can't stay silent.
I think I've processed it a number of ways in my life. Where I've settled on now is, like you, I don't want to go out and intentionally cause a fight, by any means, because the word does say that if as far as it's incumbent upon me, to live in peace with everyone. But I will say this: we are also called to be witnesses to what the Lord has done. So, in doing so, because the message of the gospel is such a countercultural thing, a fight's gonna happen. Like there's going to be a disagreement. So I think what we are called to do is, one, be good witnesses, do what the Lord has said. Also, be ready to effectively be ready to explain yourself, like why it is you are the way you are, what the Lord has done in you to cause you to be the person that you are, so that you're not doing the thing that culture says that you should do, if it goes against the word.
Mm-hmm. There's a verse on that. Be ready.
Oh, it's be ready in
goodness.
season and out of season, I think it is what it is.
There's that one. It's something with a ready answer.
You're right.
But yeah, I love that. I'm trying to.
We're gonna do a lot of quick Googling today.
It's cool.
It's Peter 3:15. Okay, here it is. Sanctify the Lord God in your hearts and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you a reason of the hope that is in you. So this kind of ties all of our conversations together, is when someone says, why aren't you going along with this? Or why are you, why do you act that way? Why do you think that way? It's being ready to give that answer based on the reason for your faith, essentially. Now, I have not seen this, but just hearing you describe this, it's a young girl from a more destitute lifestyle taken into a royal area with a eunuch. I'm like, it's Esther. It's basically the story of Esther. And that's who I'm thinking of in this conversation too. Because if you're thinking about someone who's a young Jewish girl whose beliefs are not only contradictory to the people in power, they're dangerous. I mean, she could die just for what she is and who she is. And she's brought into this basically godless society. She's surrounded by a harem. She's surrounded by concubines and eunuchs. And for a long time, she's told by Mordecai, who raised her, who she respects, don't reveal who you are to save your life, basically. And then there comes a point where he says, you have to reveal who you are, because if you don't, this great evil is going to be done. And who knows, maybe God put you here for such a time as this. And she decides, I'm going to take this stand. I'm going to go reveal who I am. I'm going to go and say something to the king. But she does it, to pull on Nate's verse, with that respect and that carefulness and that meekness. I think it's a beautiful example of this concept in execution, because she does have to give an answer, but she does it so coolly. Like, she's so cool when she does it, because she's very respectful. She's very wise. And she has the evidence to back up what she's saying. So I think Esther really ties into this conversation as well.
A beautiful connection, and one that I didn't even think of as like my central, like, you know, that it's such a good parallel. And yeah, and everybody's contributions here have been so good. And I wanted to point to even a specific scene in this series that really, really affected me. It's kind of near the end, and I won't spoil anything that leads up to it, but Mao Mao there's a point where she does go and stand up against, there's a guard outside of this palace. She needs to get in somewhere to save somebody's life, essentially. And the guard will not let her through and even strikes her. And she is hurt. She falls down, and she still like keeps standing up, like, I need to get in there. But she does not hit back. She does not, yell. She doesn't go seeking a fight, as you guys have said. She really quite literally turns the other cheek and is like, if this is my fate in order to save somebody else, this is how it has to be. It's a really, really powerful episode and scene. So but that's that is what came to mind as you guys were speaking, is that was illustrated there. Yeah.
If I perish, I perish. Exactly. As Esther said. That's
I want to rewatch it, with this in light. It's a really it's a great show. It's got a lot of despite how serious this tone of the conversation has been, it is also really lighthearted in many other ways. So it's funny, but it's also, like I said, it has a lot of different layers to it. There's so many things to dig into there.
Mm-hmm. Now, a question I had for you about the show, you talked about humility. How would you say she approaches those situations with humility? What lessons did you take away? Because I think a lot of times when we're going into situations where we sense there's injustice, maybe it's injustice against us, maybe it's injustice against people or people we care about, we go in there with a little bit of pride and a little bit of a chip on our shoulder. And it's like, hey, I'm gonna get even, or I'm gonna get justice for this. And you said she always has kind of a humble spirit with how she interacts with these people. Was there anything that really jumped out at you that influenced your own life?
And honestly, her as a character, I don't even know if humility is what you would use to describe her when you're watching her, because she does have she's very passionate about what she does, and she's very she wants to solve these cases, and she has a very interesting character. But I think the humility that I was getting from her character specifically is, she goes about her work in a way that's very I'm going to do what I can to serve other people. and I'm not going to come, she does have fight in her, but she isn't going to, yell or scream at people just because, I don't see myself as someone who deserves this kind of lifestyle. She's still going to go in there. She's going to do what she can do. And she's not seeking attention or fame for any of what she's done. She doesn't even want to raise higher in the court. She, she has opportunity if she wanted to take it, but she doesn't do that because she says, this is what I am good at. This is what I'm going to continue doing. She wants a better life for herself, but she's like, these are the skills that I can bring to the table. So as far as what, I can bring into my own life, I think, I think there's a lot of times in life where, I do feel that pride or, I'm not getting recognition for this at work or whatever. Or, I think we all have that human desire to, be recognized. But we also, I've also been trying to recognize, just because I'm not getting the acknowledgement doesn't mean I'm not using my God-given gifts, in a way that I am supposed to. Maybe God has put me here at a time such as this, to do what I can do. I don't know if that answers the question specifically, but she's a very layered character in that she does have a lot of confidence, but she doesn't seek the attention in a way that you would expect from a character like that.
It reminds me of the verse, whatsoever your hand findeth to do, do it with all your might, do everything unto the glory of God and not as unto men or to humanity. And I don't know for sure, but it almost sounds like she's motivated more by the idea of either solving the problem or helping people, not so much what I'm going to get out of it, the recognition I'm going to receive. And I think as Christians, we kind of apply that principle by saying, well, I'm working hard at my job because when people look at this, I want them to say, wow, she's doing this because of how much she loves God. She wants to really put her all into this because she's grateful or she's thankful or she's been shown so much mercy. And it's all a reflection, to God. And that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. And that's definitely something God's been showing me in the past year. So I think I need to watch Apothecary Diaries.
That was my goal, is to get somebody here to watch it. Yes, it's good.
So goal achieved. I want to thank everyone for, being here at this roundtable. Again, you all have given so much food for thought. I think our listeners and our viewers will really enjoy it and give them something to check out, nonetheless, if they haven't seen any of these shows. Well, for those of our listeners and viewers who want to follow you guys, Nate, how can they find you?
Well, you could find me on Instagram at Coronavash. You could also find me on Twitch at Coronavash. You could also find me on Twitter if you dare. If you dare broach Twitter. I barely do, but I'm also there under Coronavash, but there's a 0 in there somewhere.
All right, Casey?
I am on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me under Cutscene Addict. I'm working on getting some other things out there, but for now it's just Instagram and Facebook.
And Sophie?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, Sophiecast Cosplay, on YouTube under Hey Sophiecast or Sophiecast Cosplay. I'm also on Blue Sky. I just made an account over there, Sophiecast Cosplay, so you can find me there as well.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, keep those halos shiny and stay holy, my friends.